Injuries are just part and parcel of life playing professional football. You'll often hear it said, and certainly that is true. To an extent. That is not to say that some injuries aren't avoidable though. There are a number of preventative measures footballers can take to help avoid a spell on the sidelines, whether that be maintaining a healthy diet, making sure to always carry out a thorough warm-up before games, and to avoid dropping a 2kg jar of salad cream onto your foot, which severs 2 tendons in your big toe, like Chelsea goalkeeper Dave Besant did in 1993. Yes, today we are dealing with some of the more unusual, unfortunate, and potentially avoidable injuries in the history of the beautiful game. But before we begin, I want to say a quick word in defense of footballers who pick up seemingly bizarre injuries. I don't know about anyone else, but I am forever getting cuts, burns, and various other injuries. But enough about my sex life. No, in all seriousness, humans do find it quite easy to get hurt doing something a bit daft, and footballers are, though we sometimes seem to forget this, human. And all too human. So that is my caveat before I start throwing shade at what I hope will be some fairly interesting, unusual, and little known injuries from the weird world of football. Here are 7 footballers who have suffered some really strange injuries. Jari Litmanen. Jari Litmanen was a man who was no stranger to a spell on the sidelines. A beguilingly brilliant footballer when fully fit, Litmanen's post-Ajax years in particular were littered with setbacks, though he had already earned the nickname the Man of Glass while still starring in Amsterdam. Most of Litmanen's injuries, whilst more frequent than most, were pretty mundane though. Achilles, ankle, and muscle injuries tended to be the diagnosis. But later in his career, by which stage Litmanen's bones appeared to be plastered together using out-of-date Pritt sticks, he suffered a less severe but rather more unusual injury. On the day that Roy Hodgson was first invited by the Finnish FA for an interview regarding their vacant managerial position in 2006, he stood alongside Litmanen, who was still Finland's captain at the time, aged 35, and the sporting director of Malmö, who the midfielder was contracted to. When Malmö's sporting director popped open a can of Coca-Cola, according to Hodgson, the ring pull flew off and hit Litmanen in the eye. Fortunately, the former Liverpool and Barcelona man wasn't too badly hurt, but it was fairly reflective of his misfortune and general injury woes. At his peak, Litmanen finished 3rd in Ballon d'Or voting after playing a pivotal role in Ajax's 1995 Champions League success. Despite his many injuries, Litmanen still enjoyed a career which spanned 23 years, and he is, at least as far as I'm aware, still the only man to have played international football across 4 separate decades, namely the 1980s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. KIRK Broadfoot. A man who has played almost as many games as Jari Litmanen, KIRK Broadfoot is still playing now, having recently joined Inverness Caledonian Thistle, aged 37. Often cited as being one of the most hated players in the entire history of the Scottish game, a point that Broadfoot acknowledged in a recent interview with The Times, even supporters of the clubs that Broadfoot has played for rarely seem to have taken a shine to him. I once saw a Rangers fan justify their dislike of Broadfoot by stating that, quote, "He's not very good, he thinks he's brilliant, and he can't even cook an egg." He can't even cook an egg there isn't some kind of saying in Glasgow, at least as far as I'm aware, though clearly it should be, but rather the can't cook an egg is a reference to Broadfoot's bizarre injury that he picked up 12 years ago. In May 2009, Broadfoot attempted to poach 2 eggs in the microwave, but whilst inspecting the eggs, one of them exploded, jettisoning boiling hot liquid straight into the centre-back's face. Broadfoot was treated in hospital for scalding to his cheek, but thankfully made a full recovery and was back in action before long. The moral of the story, however, of course, is that you shouldn't get too close when inspecting your boiled eggs after taking them out of the microwave. And if you take nothing else away from this video, at least bear that vital piece of public health information in mind. Sam Henderson. I'm going to struggle for images in this segment, since Sam Henderson is a footballer who doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. But let the images that I use instead of photographs of him serve as a not too subtle hint as to how he was rather unusually injured. If you take a look at the entire body of strange injuries to footballers that have ever occurred, you will notice a distinct overrepresentation of goalkeepers that far exceeds their 1:11 ratio as professional footballers. Sam Henderson is a young goalkeeper, aged 22 now, who has already played for a number of clubs for a man of his age. Most recently of Lincoln Red Imps in the Gibraltar National League, but now a free agent, it was whilst playing for Scottish Championship side Queen of the South in 2018 that Henderson was injured in an unusual fashion, which, you might have guessed by now, was an incident involving a cow. Born in Dumfries, Henderson's father is a farmer, and it was whilst he was on his father's farm that Henderson was charged at by an aggressive cow. And that is not me referring to his mother in particularly disparaging terms, I do mean an actual cow. Henderson was struck by the farm animal, which can reach speeds of up to 40 kilometers an hour and weigh as much as 1,700 kilograms, though I suspect the heaviest cattle aren't also the fastest, but you get my point. Henderson was left with a short-term injury to his shoulder, and Queen of the South were left with just a single fit goalkeeper within their ranks. Though it could have been much worse, since the cow charged Henderson for a second time, but he was fortunately able to avoid a second collision. So there you have it, another lesson for life. Don't annoy cows. Kevin-Prince Boateng. A slightly more high-profile player, and I'm sure he'll thank me for saying that he is slightly more high-profile than Queen of the South's former third-choice goalkeeper, who is best known for being charged at by a cow. Kevin-Prince Boateng is a man who has always courted controversy. A tremendously talented footballer, once of Portsmouth and of Tottenham Hotspur, it was during his first stint at AC Milan that KPB, as he's often referred to, probably played his best football. It was also during his time at the San Siro that Boateng began picking up a series of niggling injuries, much to the frustration of the Rossoneri faithful. There was further outrage then, tinged no doubt with at least a flavour of jealousy, when Boateng's fiancée and now wife, the model and Italian TV presenter Melissa Satta, told Vanity Fair magazine that the midfielder's injuries were caused by the couple having sex between 7 to 10 times a week. This coming during the same week that Boateng was ruled out for more than a month due to a muscular injury to his left thigh. Satta later revealed that she regretted the comments in 2020, though she didn't actually retract the claim that it was their frequent romantic involvements that caused Boateng's injury problems. Now aged 34, Boateng has become a real journeyman over the last 7 or 8 years, most recently returning to Hertha Berlin in the summer just gone. Philippe Mexes. A man who played alongside Kevin-Prince Boateng at AC Milan. Between the two of them, the Rossoneri have had a pretty rotten time in terms of players picking up less typical injuries. In fact, you could even add Alessandro Nesta into the mix, or into this 7, who once ruptured a tendon in his left thumb during a heavy session of playing FIFA. Mexes' injury was caused by a less playful and more ostentatious pastime, namely spending time in sunbeds or tanning beds, depending upon which word you prefer. Mexes missed a Champions League tie with Celtic whilst playing for AC Milan in 2013 due to an eye injury that left doctors and physios at the San Siro stumped as to what was wrong with him. It transpired that Mexes' condition had been caused by too many hours spent basking in the light of sunbeds, which I feel obliged to point out in my new, unofficial and totally unqualified role as a public health expert, can cause many other far more serious health issues. So, just be safe out there. AC Milan fans were a little bit irked to have to go without the Frenchman due to an injury caused by Mexes' desire to look sun-kissed, and their irritation was exacerbated when he returned to action with a leather-like complexion that even Andrew Neil would be proud of. Mexes left AC Milan in 2016, and after a year without a club, he retired in 2017. Eva Banega. If there are two types of footballers who cropped up more than any other whilst planning this 7, it was goalkeepers, who I've already mentioned, and mercurial talents with bad boy images such as Kevin-Prince Boateng and Eva Banega. Banega was a man who never seemed to care too much about what people thought of him. With a touch of Juan Roman Riquelme about him on the pitch, Banega was embroiled in an online sex scandal within days of arriving in Europe, aged 19. After he was caught performing what the newspapers described as a lewd sex act on webcam. He continued to cut a controversial figure, for numerous other reasons, over the next 12 years, and Presumably he has to watch his step a little bit closer now, playing for Al-Shabaab in Saudi Arabia, where the wrong type of partying might get you a limb cut off or, worse still, your head. One of many bizarre stories about the Argentine involves the time in which he was run over by his own car. And yes, you did hear that right. While starring for Valencia in 2012, Banega was filling up his car with petrol but forgot to apply the handbrake. You can see where I'm going with this. As the car rolled forward, it went straight over the midfielder's foot, causing an ankle injury that required surgery and left Banega out of action for weeks. Thankfully, incidents such as this have been greatly reduced here in England in recent weeks, where you just can't get any petrol and therefore can't get run over by your own car whilst doing so. We are very forward-thinking like that. Svein Grøndahlin. A cult hero in Norway who is little known outside of the Nordic nation, Svein Grøndahlin won 77 caps for the 6th happiest country in the world. An athletic, versatile and uncompromising defender, Grøndahlin spent his best years with Rosenborg, and it was whilst he was playing for the Norwegian Giants that he suffered, quite possibly, the strangest injury in this entire seven. In an effort to keep fit ahead of a World Cup qualifier, Grøndahlin went for a jog in the forest, a seemingly pretty standard training session for a Scandinavian centre-back. This would be no standard forest jog though, since Grøndahlin, presumably not looking too far ahead in front of him, ran straight into a moose. Not a chocolate mousse, I should point out, which would provide a much softer and tastier landing, but a moose or an elk, the largest and heaviest of all the existing species of the deer family. Another lesson for life there. If you're going to run into a member of the deer family whilst out jogging in a Norwegian forest, don't pick a moose, since they are the worst ones to run into, honestly. They're massive, and Svein Grøndahlin learned that lesson the hard way. At least Sam Henderson was charged at by a cow rather than charging into a cow or, a moose in Grøndahlin's case. Not only did the jog not really help with Grøndahlin's fitness levels then, it actually saw him miss the qualifier, out injured altogether. But thankfully, he was only sidelined for one game. So that is it for today's absolutely fabulous video, if I do say so myself. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Hit the like button if that was the case, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, of course, goes without saying, to HITC Sevens and have notifications turned on. You can also find me on Twitter and on Instagram, or on Instagram, depending upon whether you want to follow me on both or one, or most likely neither. The username to do so is just at HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.